The moment I dropped my in-laws at the airport, I finally exhaled. 12 years of marriage had taught me that quiet drives back to my army base were the closest thing I ever got to peace. Then my phone rang. It was Maria, our housekeeper of 10 years, and she sounded terrified. "Ma'am, don't go home," she whispered. "Open your security cameras first." My pulse spiked as I pulled onto the shoulder and opened the live feed. Seconds later, I watched my husband unlock our front door for another woman, and in that instant, I realized my marriage had already ended. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 31 years old. I serve as a major in the United States Army, commanding a logistics unit at a military installation just outside Chicago. My career has taught me to stay calm when everyone else panics, to trust evidence over emotion, and to never make life-changing decisions in the heat of the moment. Those lessons saved me on deployments overseas. I never imagined I'd need them inside my own marriage. Daniel and I had been married for 12 years. We weren't the kind of couple who constantly posted perfect photos online, but I honestly believed we had something real. Military life demanded long hours, unexpected deployments, and missed holidays. Daniel always told me he understood. Whenever I apologized for another canceled vacation or another late-night emergency at the base, he'd smile and say, "You're serving your country. I'll always be here waiting." I believed every word. Our housekeeper, Maria, had worked for us for almost 10 years. She wasn't simply an employee anymore. She had watched our home through promotions, relocations, and family gatherings. She knew where everything belonged before I did. More importantly, she had become someone I trusted completely. That Tuesday morning had felt ordinary. Daniel's parents were flying home after spending a week with us. I drove them to the airport before reporting back to the base. My mother-in-law hugged me goodbye, thanking me for making time despite my schedule. Daniel kissed me before I left and reminded me to drive safely. Nothing about his face suggested that within an hour my entire life would change. Traffic leaving the airport was surprisingly light. I had music playing quietly while mentally preparing for the afternoon briefing waiting for me at headquarters. Then my phone rang. Maria. She never called during work hours. I answered through the car's Bluetooth. "Maria? Everything okay?" For several seconds, she didn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Ma'am, please don't come home." Every muscle in my body tightened. "What happened?" "Please, just pull over and check your security cameras first." I glanced at the dashboard clock. "Maria, tell me what's going on." "I can't," she whispered. "If he hears me..." The line went silent. My military instincts took over before panic could. I pulled onto the highway shoulder, shifted into park, and immediately opened the security app connected to every camera around our house. The front door camera loaded first. Daniel stood on our porch. He wasn't alone. A woman I had never seen before walked up beside him carrying 2 large storage boxes. Daniel smiled, unlocked the front door, and stepped aside for her like she belonged there. I frowned. Maybe she was helping organize something. Maybe there was an explanation. I switched to the living room camera. The explanation disappeared. The woman wrapped both arms around Daniel and kissed him. Not a greeting between friends. Not a misunderstanding. The kind of kiss that only happens when 2 people believe no one is watching. I couldn't breathe. For a moment, I simply stared at my phone while every sound around me disappeared. Then I watched something even worse. Together, they began removing framed photographs from the walls. Wedding pictures, family portraits, vacation memories. Daniel handed each frame to the woman, who carefully packed them into the boxes. Then, he pointed toward the display cabinet holding my military medals and retirement shadow box. She nodded and started clearing that shelf too. This wasn't an affair happening in secret. This was a plan. A carefully organized plan. Instead of starting my car and racing home, I forced myself to inhale slowly. Anger wanted me to confront him immediately. Training told me something different. Evidence first. Emotion later. I downloaded every camera recording directly to secure cloud storage, saved backup copies onto my phone, and immediately called Maria again. She answered on the first ring. "Ma'am," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry." I heard him tell her you wouldn't be back for hours after taking your in-laws to the airport. That's when I knew I had to warn you. As I stared at my husband calmly dismantling our life on my screen, one terrifying truth became impossible to ignore. He hadn't just betrayed me. He believed he had planned the perfect day to erase me from our home without me ever finding out. I ended the call with Maria and stayed parked on the shoulder for another 5 minutes. My hands wanted to shake. My heart wanted to break. But years in uniform had taught me that panic creates mistakes, and mistakes destroy evidence. I needed facts, not assumptions. The first person I called wasn't my husband. It was Captain Rebecca Hayes, one of my closest friends, and a military attorney I'd trusted for years. She answered immediately. "Emily, everything okay?" "No," I replied quietly. "I think my marriage just ended." I briefly explained what I'd seen on the cameras. Rebecca interrupted before I could finish. "Don't confront him." I wasn't planning to. "Good. Save every recording. Don't tell him what you know. If this is bigger than an affair, you only get one chance to protect yourself." That was exactly what I needed to hear. Instead of driving home, I waited until the cameras showed Daniel and the woman leaving the house together almost 2 hours later. Only then did I start my engine. The house was silent when I walked inside. Nothing looked unusual from the entryway. But once I stepped into the living room, I immediately noticed the empty spaces on the walls. Several framed family photographs were gone. The display cabinet that had once held my military awards had been partially emptied. Boxes of tape and packing supplies sat neatly against one wall. Daniel hadn't been hiding anything. He had been preparing to erase me. I slowly searched the house, taking photographs before touching anything. Inside the guest bedroom, I found 6 sealed moving boxes. Each carried handwritten labels. Kitchen, office, master closet, private. The last one caught my attention. Inside were family photo albums, jewelry my grandmother had left me, military challenge coins collected during overseas deployments, and documents from our home safe. Mixed between them was a thick blue folder. My name wasn't on it. Daniel's was. I opened it carefully. The first page was a 12-month apartment lease. The tenant names read Daniel Carter and Ashley Monroe. Ashley. So now the woman had a name. The lease had started nearly 2 years earlier. My stomach tightened. This wasn't a recent mistake. It was another life. Behind the lease were airline confirmations, hotel reservations, restaurant receipts, and dozens of printed emails discussing furniture deliveries and future vacation plans. Every page pushed the betrayal further back in time. Then I reached something even worse. Bank statements. Dozens of transfers from our joint checking account into another account I had never seen. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. $5,000, $8,000, $12,000. The total climbed well into 6 figures. Daniel hadn't simply been cheating. He had been quietly financing a completely different future, while I believed we were saving for retirement. I photographed every page before placing them exactly where I'd found them. Rebecca had been right. Evidence mattered. Emotion could wait. Before leaving the room, I contacted our bank's fraud department and requested an immediate review of every large transfer from our joint accounts. Within minutes, they placed temporary holds on several pending transactions while my attorney prepared emergency paperwork. By evening, everything important had been documented. The evidence was backed up in 3 different locations. Every financial record had been copied. Every photograph had been preserved. Every security recording had been secured. When Daniel finally walked through the front door carrying takeout containers, he smiled exactly the way he always had. "Hey," he said. "Long day." "The usual," I answered. He kissed my forehead as though nothing had happened. Over dinner, he casually explained that he'd spent the afternoon meeting clients across town. He even apologized for missing my phone call earlier. I nodded, smiled, and asked ordinary questions. Inside, every lie landed like another stone. Daniel believed his secret was still perfectly hidden. He had no idea I already knew about Ashley, the apartment, the missing money, or the future he'd been secretly building without me. And for the first time in 12 years, I realized silence could be far more powerful than confrontation. For the next 4 days, I behaved exactly as Daniel expected. I went to work. I came home on time. We ate dinner together.
We talked about ordinary things.
He never suspected that every hour brought him closer to the moment his entire double life would collapse. Meanwhile, Rebecca and my civilian attorney worked together to organize every piece of evidence into a single timeline. The security footage, the apartment lease, the financial transfers, the photographs. Every document was dated, labeled, and impossible to dispute. When everything was ready, I sent Daniel a simple text. Our anniversary dinner is Friday at 7. I made reservations somewhere special. Don't be late. He replied almost instantly. Wouldn't miss it. Love you. Reading those words no longer hurt. They simply reminded me how comfortable he had become lying. Friday evening arrived. Daniel walked into the private dining room wearing the navy suit I had bought him for our 10th anniversary. He smiled as he saw the candles and neatly arranged table. Then his smile disappeared. Rebecca was sitting beside my attorney. A financial investigator sat across from them. Maria quietly occupied the chair nearest the door. Daniel stopped walking. Emily, what's this? I remained seated. Please have a seat. He looked around the room before slowly lowering himself into the empty chair. This isn't funny. I agree, I answered calmly. That's why we're here. Rebecca connected a laptop to the large television mounted on the wall. The first video began playing. It showed Daniel opening our front door for Ashley. Neither of them spoke. The room stayed completely silent as the footage continued. Ashley kissed him. They removed our wedding photographs. They packed my military awards. They laughed together while carrying boxes toward the garage. The recording ended. Daniel immediately leaned forward. Emily, this isn't what it looks like. I quietly slid the apartment lease across the table. Then explained that. His face lost its color. Before he could answer, the financial investigator placed several printed bank statements beside it. Perhaps you can also explain these transfers. Daniel looked from one document to another. I was going to tell you. When? I asked. After everything settled down. Rebecca opened another folder. Would that have been before or after moving into the apartment you leased 2 years ago? Daniel rubbed both hands across his face. You don't understand. No, I replied. I understand perfectly. I stood and slowly walked toward the television. For 12 years, I trusted you without hesitation. While I was serving overseas, working late at the base, and believing we were building a future together, you were building another life. He lowered his eyes. I never wanted to hurt you. You planned this for years. I pointed toward the documents. The apartment wasn't an accident. The hidden accounts weren't accidents. The missing money wasn't an accident. You planned every step. Maria finally spoke. I warned her because I couldn't watch you do this anymore. Daniel looked at her with disbelief. You told her? Maria nodded once. I couldn't stay silent. He turned back toward me. I'll end things with Ashley. We can fix this. We'll go to counseling. I'll pay everything back. His voice became more desperate with every sentence. I listened without interrupting. When he finally stopped talking, I quietly answered. You're offering to fix something you destroyed long before I discovered it. The room fell silent again. My attorney placed divorce papers on the table. I've already filed. Daniel stared at them without touching a single page. I never thought you'd actually leave. I almost smiled. That's because you confused my patience with weakness. Over the following months, the legal process moved surprisingly quickly. The documented financial transfers protected my share of our assets. The court ordered reimbursement for the marital funds Daniel had secretly diverted. The house was sold, and the proceeds were divided according to the evidence instead of his original plan. Ashley disappeared from his life before the divorce was finalized. Apparently, she wasn't interested in a future built on accountability. Maria remained one of my closest friends. Without her courage, I might have walked into an empty house and believed every lie Daniel told me. Almost a year later, I drove through the gates of my army base just before sunrise. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel betrayed anymore. I felt free. Looking back, I realized my marriage hadn't ended the moment I watched those security cameras. It had ended the day Daniel chose deception over loyalty. The phone call from Maria didn't destroy my life. It saved it. And sometimes, the quietest warning becomes the beginning of the strongest chapter you'll ever live.